Excellent. Hi, my name is Ariel Frost. I am the manager of partnerships and learning here at Ingenuity. I'm a violist, a singer, a composer, also a cosplayer, and a college professor at North Park University, and also the founder of a youth development organization focused on music and social justice in Greater Englewood. So I'm happy to be the first to welcome you to our learning session today, and also to welcome my colleagues who are on the call here with me. So I'll hand it over to Cecily.
Hello, everyone. Thank you, Ariel. I'm Cecily Langford, founder of One Lawndale Arts and Activism Incubator, a former CPS educator. I'm a wordler. I'm a former PTA bus driver. I'm a mother of three, including a UCLA Bruin. And today my heart really goes out to the Los Angeles metropolitan area and sends peace. So happy to be here.
Good afternoon, everyone. Saludos. My name is Lily Cruz. I am the Director of Partnerships and Learning, just made 60 days this week. And I come into this space as a Boricua, a Chicago kid, a CPS alum, a CPS teacher, school leader, and parent who is grounded in the value of la cultura cura, which translated into English means culture heals. At Ingenuity, our mission is very clear to us and hopefully to you. We want to ensure that every student in every grade in every school has access to the arts as part of a well-rounded arts education. And we do this primarily through 4 strategies, one of them being our team, partnerships and learning. And when we talk about high quality, we are referring to the values of quality, which are the ones that you see here. And we'll be touching on most of these, if not all of these, but we'll be really digging deeply into 3, is collaborative, relational, and relationship-based, embraces diversity and cultural competence, and is strength-based. And today, the Learning Institute is also grounded in this program year's theme, rooting in community, relating with ourselves. So we hope that you are able to join us for all of our Learning Institutes, our upcoming communities of practice, as well as some bigger events and gatherings that we have going on. You'll see them on the slide here, and you can also find them on our website, and we'll make sure to share them with you post-event. And our objectives today are rooted in the head, heart, hand model. So the head being the intellectual objective, the heart, the emotional objective, and the hand, the objective around how the work will be applied. And so take a moment silently to read these objectives on your own. And while our primary audience is arts partners, the framework that we will be speaking to today as we think about partnerships with school communities, the Yoso's cultural wealth model is really for everyone and anyone that works with young people in arts education and beyond. So if you are not an arts partner, just adjust your lens, but we are confident that you will still walk away from today's session feeling filled with this community learning space. And last but not least, today's session is grounded in these arts partner standards of practice. So create a healthy classroom culture and seek understanding. And these and the rest of the arts partner standards of practice were co-created by the arts sector over the course of 2 years to provide this collective vision of what arts education can look like in Chicago.
Great. Thank you so much, Lily. So our agenda today, we'll start off with some community agreements and also our land acknowledgement and arts offering of that acknowledgement. And then we'll go through Yoso's cultural wealth model as an overview. And then we'll have a wonderful storytelling session from Cecily, who is the leader of Olai as Freedom Dreaming. And then we'll have some small breakout group reflections, a short reflection, followed by our survey, which will give you time to do during our session today, and then a closing activity. So ideally, we would create our agreements together, as agreements are meant to be something that is co-created by the people who are there. But we have a really short amount of time today. So I'm just going to offer up the agreements that we have often used for our learning institutes and ask for your feedback if there's anything that you would like to add or take away or comment on briefly. So the first is to take space, make space. And that's coming from a place of personal awareness of identity and intersectionality. Next, speak from personal experience. So when we're speaking with each other and learning from each other, making sure that we're coming from a place of our own experience. Practice confidentiality. So take away lessons, but not personal content. And then hold and support safe and brave space. And finally, as much as possible, stay present and engaged. But do please make sure that you take care of yourself. And one of the things that, of course, this is a virtual session. So if you need to get up and get a drink of water or have a stretch break, any of those things, certainly do that. But in our agenda, we have about 10 minutes where we'll be in breakout groups with each other. So if you can try to be present during that time, that would be lovely. And that'll be in the second half of our time together today. And then here's some norms and housekeeping. So we like to use the chat to share our thoughts, questions, and reactions. Also, as I named before, make sure to take care of yourself, whatever you need in the moment. Please keep yourself muted when you're not speaking. And then also closed captioning is available during our session today, and we'll be sharing the slides after the session. And as you probably know, when you join, the session is being recorded. Ingenuity would like to acknowledge that this convening is taking place on the stolen and unceded land of the Council of Three Fires, the Ojibwe, Potawatomi, and Odawa nations. Because of the Great Lakes, the land naturally became a site of travel, healing, trade, and gathering for more than a dozen other Native tribes, and is home to over 100,000 tribal members in the state of Illinois that still practice their traditions and care for the land. And we'd like to offer a bit of art in conjunction with our land acknowledgement today. To be thankful on stolen land is a practice to understand how you can hold gratitude in one hand and mourning on the other. Coming together with a truth not to soothe self-guilt and shame, but to name what has been erased and how restoration is essential to the potential of what can grow and abound in ground seeded with reconciliation.
Thank you, Ariel. And to root in community, we are offering a lens. So we are offering Yoso's cultural wealth model to collectively examine, learn from, and hopefully use to continue to better understand school communities, especially when we are not from those spaces or we're coming in as outside partners. And this is a topic that folks asked us to speak more to, bring people together around. So not only is the Learning Institute around this, but our community of practice this month will also continue the conversation around this with Yoso's cultural model, cultural wealth model. And so what is this framework all about? So Dr. Tara Yoso is a researcher and scholar of education who created this asset-based model, and it names 6 forms of cultural capital that college students, first-year college students, bring to the space. So she was really thinking about first-year college students, but they were, like that K through 12, like coming into that space, cultivating this cultural wealth, and obviously even before school doing that. And it's a way to think about wealth in ways that can be overlooked by dominant society. And so Ariel, Cecily, and I are going to walk you through all 6 before we transition to Cecily. And so the first one is linguistic capital, right? So this is about the various language and communication skills that students bring with them to spaces. And Yoso really talks a lot about how storytelling is also a huge part of what this cultural capital is about. And all the ways that it helps students build their memorization skills, their attention to detail, their dramatic pauses, which is like beautifully aligned to the arts. And an example of this is language brokering. So acting as a translator for family members or community members. And if you were a language broker and are comfortable, like just put a little thumbs up on your screen or as a reaction, because this is very common. I was a language broker. Here we go. We've got some going, right? I too was a language broker for my parents who, my mother only spoke English or Spanish, and my father did speak English and Spanish, but his dominant and best language to communicate was Spanish and still is. And when I was younger, this was always kind of embarrassing and frustrating, but also it, put me on the phone with doctors and really and other folks and really helped me kind of like hone my skills around asking for what I need and really understanding how systems work, sometimes in not so great ways. So now I'm going to move us on to a second cultural capital. And so this one is familial capital. And this refers to all of the networks, the social networks, the familial networks that students might have. And so in this photo, these are my family members. It was taken in 1980. And on my right, or to the right of the photo, is my maternal abuelita. In the middle is my cousin, Marisol. And on the left is my titi, my aunt through my mother's side. And my cousin, Marisol, in the middle, when she started kindergarten, because she did not speak English well, she was put in a special education class. And there's nothing wrong with being in a special education class, except that's not what she needed. And there was also no bilingual support in her school. And we were, as a family, always together, always taking care of each other, always, spending time together. And so my mom said, do you want to use our address and have Marisol come to our school? Because there is a bilingual teacher there, Ms. Cuesta, who can support Mari. So that's another example of familial cultural wealth. All the ways that maybe a system may not support students, but the ways that they are able to support one another. And it's not only through systems, but in many different ways.
Thanks so much, Lily. Our next one is social capital. And Yoso defines this form of capital as students' peers and other social contacts, and emphasizes how students utilize these contacts to gain access to college and navigate other social institutions. And so on this slide is a photo of Tanika Johnson, who's a photographer and social justice artist and lifelong resident of Chicago's South Side neighborhood of Englewood, which is also happens to be where the organization that I founded was working. She's the co-founder of the Englewood Arts Collective and the Resident Association of Greater Englewood, which seek to reframe the narrative of Southside communities and mobilize people and resources for positive change. I have seen this wealth play out when interacting with students in my after-school program. There were some young people whose program instructor didn't show up one day in the after-school time. There were lots of different things happening at Wentworth Elementary, which is where my program was happening. And they wanted to come and see what was happening in my orchestra class. And I can tell you that when I was a young person, there's no way that just like a random child that the orchestra person didn't know would be like invited to be part of what we were doing. But I asked the students, there were three young girls there in 8th grade, and I asked them how they wanted to participate. And they said they were really interested in like taking photos and posting on social media. So I just handed them over my phone and I was like, here's Shift's Instagram, take photos, do whatever you like, kind of just observe what we're doing. And they created the best content that had ever been on our social media page. And I was really glad that I was able to do that, but also like surprised and not surprised at the same time that they had like just such a great experience in spending time on social media and therefore better time making interesting content. Our next example is navigational. So this refers to students' skills and abilities to navigate social institutions, including educational spaces. And on here, you can see the crest for Alpha Kappa Alpha, which is the oldest Greek-lettered organization established by African-American college-educated women and the first sorority of any type at MIT. And it was founded at Howard University in 1908. So when students create their own organizations and govern themselves, we can see what's important to them and also learn more about their needs and where we fit into their lives. For me, my own Greek organization, Sigma Alpha Iota, which is a music fraternity for women, helped me to navigate the complexities of being a music major at my college. And it also just gave me a wealth of knowledge on how to succeed in my classes, as well as an opportunity to pass that knowledge on to younger people in my fraternity. So the things that we all had in common with each other were and creating our own chapter really helped us to make sure that all of us were being shepherded onto the next thing. Like, you know, what do you need for so-and-so's music history class? Hey, these are my notes from that class. Hey, this is the really interesting or difficult final exam for this. Here's a study guide. And all of those things were really helpful to me and also as a recipient and to be able to pass those things on.
Thanks a lot, Ariel. Now I'll talk a little bit about aspirational capital. And this capital really refers to the hopes and dreams that students have. Yoso explains that this source of cultural wealth comes from marginalized students and their families when they continue to have high educational aspirations despite the many persistent education inequities that we are all very familiar with today and have been for many, many multitudes of years. And this image, as it actually turns out, comes from a community with whom I have a lot of experience, North Lawndale. It's from 2020. And it is featuring a group called the North Lawndale Parent Community Coalition, NLPCC. And this is a pretty amazing moment. NLP LPCC really successfully prevented Mayor Lightfoot from consolidating and closing 3 local schools in 2020, Crown, Sumner, and Lawndale Community Academy. There was a proposed new STEAM school on the table. And, you know, in the years between 2015 and 2020, the Chicago Public Schools student-based budgeting program formula meant that Lawndale school budgets had been cut by $4 million in that time. So this parent group, NLPCC, demanded that instead of this consolidation and this, you know, shiny new school concept, that CPS increase investment for the existing school budgets. And they aspired for community continuity in that way over flashy new ideas without any real local, authentic local input. And they really were successful. So for instance, yeah, one of my best friends is the principal of Sumner today, and they are they're definitely thriving, and their parent involvement is strong. So that is an exciting example of aspirational capital leveraged to really save community pillars. And our final community wealth component today that we'll talk about is called resistance capital. And this refers to what Yoso talks about as knowledges and skills fostered through oppositional behavior that challenges inequality. And so this is another very beautiful story here, featuring a young activist. This is a young woman who really flexed her resistant capital while being a student organizer at Washington High School during the 2021 battle against the relocation of General Iron from Lincoln Park up on the north side to the southeast side of Chicago, which posed a pretty significant health risk to Black and Brown community members there. This was truly successful in that the movement primarily really drew from students' resistance capital as a huge strength. There was hunger strikes involved. There was a big coalition of fighters against this move. And ultimately, the resistance was successful to stave off the relocation, and the iron facility was not relocated to the southeast side by George Washington High School. And this young woman reminds me a lot of a person with whom I had the pleasure of working as an administrator, Edminia, who is a Farragut Admiral, who her own resistance capital really was a beautiful thing to observe while I was at her school, while I was an administrator of Farragut. And now today she is serving in I think the Student Voice office. So this is we have many examples to share, I think, around this capital of resistance for young people standing up and flexing their wealth in this way. So we have now gone through all 6. And so now we segue to my story, my freedom dream story. And these 6 forms of cultural capital will show up in this story today that I tell you. And now that we've introduced you all to them, perhaps you're already familiar with them. Hopefully there's some deepening of your understanding of them. And so hello and welcome to my freedom dream story today. I would like to start with a quote from Grace Lee Boggs, who reminds us that real lasting social change requires that people, quote, not only struggle against existing institutions, they must make a philosophical/spiritual leap and become more human beings. In order to change or transform the world, they must transform themselves. She said that in 2011. And one note before I jump in more about my story is a gesture I want to include in my storytelling today that helps me center my humanity in this story. So when you see me place my hands on my heart like this, I'd like you to imagine you are hearing a chorus behind me, perhaps my ancestors, and maybe they're also standing behind me too here in the field of Ingenuity Blue. So now that is something I hope you can indulge me with when I do that, excuse me, I will get going. Ready? So now I will segue to what is Olai and my freedom dream. And here we go. So centered on abolitionist principles and rooted in freedom dreams, One Lawndale Arts and Activism Incubator that I founded is a vision framed by the unlearning and dismantling of systemic and interpersonal racism that causes residents of North and South Lawndale on the southwest side of Chicago to other their siblings. It interrupts scarcity of creative options and resources available to youth and develops anti-racist artists and activists. Olai is a hub for thinking, creating, and action within the southwest side of Chicago that centers racial healing, liberatory expression, and community building. Our primary partners are youth, and racial healing is at the center of the activism work we hope to achieve in Lawndale. Olai builds on past unification projects, of course, in North Lawndale and Little Village, which is South Lawndale, for those that maybe don't know that. La Vita also. And we are going to create new power and real liberation for these communities, our communities, by providing collaborative and brave facilitation, fresh thought partnership, experienced leadership, racial healing towards Black-Brown solidarity, and access to high-quality, community-rooted arts-based resources that create a new, liberated, and unified Lawndale, one Lawndale. My dream for Olai is to become a home place for youth, like the late Bell Hooks talks about in her essay, Home Place, a Site of Resistance. Olai helps heal some of my deepest wounds by lifting up the highest of hopes and actualizing an arts-based abolitionist space for racial healing and collaborative community empowerment. Olai will invite a cohort of 10 to 20 school-age youth to apply for this incubator. Our summer immersive experience will feature artist workshops, liberatory educational workshops, collective racial healing circles, mentoring sessions, and collaborative arts creation practice rituals. A community-based, youth-initiated and created project will serve as the culminating goal each summer's end. All youth will receive stipends for their participation that compensates them at least 50% above the hourly minimum wage. And this dream will be seen as successful if self-identified, gang-involved, or gang-curious youth engage with and emerge from Olai with a different choice to make about their future. We hope to include a wide spectrum of youth with lots of intersecting identities into this project. And who am I? Well, I am a biracial Latina, losing my voice, mother of 3, wife of George, a Black American. I'm an educator, daughter of a Colombian immigrant, and a 6'8" Swedish Chicagoan father, both of whom passed away years before I arrived at Farragut. I have taught and worked with teachers pretty much all over Chicago for 20 plus years. And though born on the north side, I grew up in Evanston. I'm an adult orphan. I know grief pretty well. My lived experience in the skin that I'm in requires continuous healing as I grow and become, as I seek to belong and lead to include. And I will circle back to this soon, but know that the 5 years that I helped lead the Farragut community in Lawndale as an assistant principal taught me a million lessons. Some are clear, some I will never completely understand, all of which led to the birth of this baby. Lessons deep in joy, grief, and all things in between. I should share now that I have not yet publicly told this origin or genesis story, this birth story. And so I'm hopeful you all have gracious hearts when you hear it in all its rawness. Building intentional relationships with communities means we need to listen differently. To tell my story and the story of Olai, we have to tell the story of Lawndale and Farragut. In the span of 20 years, 1970s through the 90s, Farragut went from a primarily Black school to a primarily Latina school, and it should shock no one that this transition was marked with actual bloodshed within the halls of the school as groups vied for power, belonging, and a chance at a decent education. Cermak Avenue is the dividing line between North and South Lawndale. And by the numbers, both sides of this road, Cermak Road, experience intense levels of unemployment, gang, clique violence, political corruption, subpar education, all the intended outcomes of divestment as public policy and real estate practices. I entered leadership in Lawndale coming from Logan Humboldt, that I call Lowbolt Spark. And no one in this school, Farragut, told me about this history. There was no orientation. I learned it through the pain of kids coming to the school building, crossing Cermak. Dorothy was one of my earlier teachers. Bang, bang, bang! Farragut's front door yelled out in panic. School had started and somehow the breezeway was quiet enough to hear this alert. I opened the door and saw Dorothy wide-eyed and desperate. She's coming after me. Who? I said, seeing no one as I looked beyond the breathless child. Somebody's mom. She said, get out of here, N. This is our school. And please note, this year is 2021. My first day at Farragut was August 8th, 2016, though. And on that day, I learned there had been a group of established people, a group established called Admirals for Black and Latino Empowerment, also known as ABLE, which apparently was a coalition to promote unity efforts way before I got there. We pieced this together, though, after finding an abandoned box of t-shirts with that moniker, ABLE. I had the sense that I knew I was onto something when I showed the very grumpy and very anti-child clerk there that the ABLE t-shirt, and she instantly said, "Where did you get that? That shirt is not approved here." I would eventually resurrect that group for a bit, attempting to rebuild trust at the school after years of toxic mistrust that did not serve students and that was, of course, racialized. ABLE 2.0 allowed for me and my little girl to step into the DEI conversation with the hope that we could do the inside out work that would result in needed key policy shifts to eventually impact students' access to good stuff like the IB program, which skewed disproportionately away from Black students. Building intentional partnerships requires a deep curiosity about the community partnerships exist within. And stepping back further, the One Lawndale movement is a response to years of racism, specifically when redlining practices after the Great Migration in Chicago excluded Black people from home ownership. The real estate industry fanned fears for whites to leave to the suburbs and ultimately allow for some Mexican Americans to achieve home ownership in South Lawndale, Little Village, La Villita, beginning in the 60s. In the 1970s, Farragut was almost all Black, and then in 1983, when Harrison High School closed, after a long history of resistant capital and big protests, Latina students were redirected to Farragut, thereby tipping racial demographics towards brown over Black. Today, the fact that Little Village La Villita was originally called South Lawndale has pretty much been erased. Most Farragut students who live in La Villita today do not know they live in Lawndale. In fact, I was leading an ABLE meeting when a trio of adults were researching something about Little Village when we read that Little Village was once South Lawndale, and a light bulb went off. The veteran Afro-Latina teacher next to me said, "Why have I never known this?" Oh, anti-Blackness. Lately, I have been doing even more research as Olaya is preparing to run a youth participatory action research project starting next week. And one input we know we want to give youth to frame their lived histories is more neighborhood history. I've been researching the racial demography of North and South Lawndale across the decades a lot more. And I recently found an article that really struck me called "Racial Strife Runs Deep at High School." It talks about the changes in the community from the 70s to the 90s. It talked about the Black principal, Mr. Newton, who had been in place for 6 years, who could, quote, no longer control the school because his racial identity as a Black man could not deal with Latino gangs in and around the school. Latino students were attacking Black students regularly on the way to school. Black students in the school were aligning themselves with Black gangs to handle these racial attacks while in school. The year of this article was 1992. 1992, the year I graduated high school at Evanston Township, which was at the time 45% white, 45% Black, and 10% other. So zooming out and heading north, we can see me, Ceci, adolescent me. Earlier in that year, you could see a student-led walkout and protest of a racist incident where a German teacher broke up a fight and then called Black students monkeys that should go back to Africa. And when the administration did nothing, students resisted. I was a member of Students Together Against Racism. And we organized this protest. So there I was in the same year, 1992, on the other side of town, getting activated, listening to Public Enemy, rocking out, finding a way to belong in the binary, and probably going to school after school to Sound Exposure, my favorite club, to learn how to set up a punk rock show at the local church. A mirror could attest that in 1992, Ceci was peering in and starting to ask, who am I and how do I lead? Whose am I and how do I belong? I was finding my voice as a biracial Latina person, highly concerned with justice and fairness in the world. I was moving into music as a way to express myself and connect to my peers. My adolescent evolution was pushed hard by these resources and resulting experiences that Evanston and, of course, my family allowed me to access. Building intentional and authentic partnerships requires us to do mirror work. The image on the left is the birthday post I made for Olai, June 11th, 2020. I knelt down with my friend and fellow AP for 8 minutes at the gas station at 19th and Pulaski to commemorate the police murder of George Floyd. This was about a mile away from Farragut. The events that occurred in the uprising surrounding George Floyd's murder rocked Lawndale nasty style with big violent flare-ups between Blacks and Latinos. Some said CPD even linked arms with the Latin Kings up and down 26th Street to keep out Black looters. Black people were targeted and dragged from vehicles. In Cicero, the neighboring suburb, Latinos were shot dead in the violence. Finally, with the help of New Life and other hyperlocal organizations, a truce and peace march was called where the kings and vice lords marched towards one another en masse and met at the gas station to halt the street violence. A beloved security guard at Farragut had called me the day before this truce and said, I have never missed a day of work yet, but as a Black man, I refuse to risk my life to come to work today. Mirror and lens work helps us better understand grief and community contexts. And then let's fast forward to spring of 2021. It was my 5th year in the AP role, and a year plus of that was pandemic time, eternal and warped. The mirror work I was doing told me I wasn't well spiritually or emotionally, and in my bones, I knew I had to reroute myself in order to survive. The factors pushing me to change were strong and layered, mothering 3 children, attending 3 different CPS schools, feeling racially isolated and exploited within a leadership team, and an addiction to frenzy and a subsequent self-medication pattern. And then my turning point, the police shooting death of 14-year-old Adam Toledo on the edge of Farragut's campus. He was to become a Farragut admiral in a couple of years, but I did not know him nor his family. And over the 5 years I did serve there, I felt like I did get to know kids very well, like Adam Toledo. I met their parents. I went to their houses. I tried to get them to come to school with me. I would talk to their teachers about ideas on how to share power with students, work towards culturally relevant teaching, and honor student voice. We worked on loving the Adams at school, and many teachers believed in their quest to steward their own learning. And at the balloon release one April afternoon, shortly after he was murdered and before the body camera footage was released, there I stood. While so gruesome and awful, some parts were so beautiful, and my mind followed the white ghost floating into the air, among so many others, free. That is when the idea of Olai, a seed, took root in my heart, my dark and muddy heart, and blew some wind into my abolitionist mind. And this conception also meant a reinvention for me and what work I want to create and align to in this world. Sean Ginwright's work in his book, The 4 Pivots, talks about how we can move from lens, looking and analyzing outward into the world, to mirror, looking and reflecting inward into self. And learning to work this pivot has been important as I build Olai forward. And this slide can show you a bit about my lens and mirror process in shaping Olai. To tell this story to you, two important things you should note about my mirror work. My little girl Ceci is present always and is cared for. And for me, working on healing is transmuting grief forever. And to this end, preparing this talk has been very healing. In bringing this story out in the light for the first time this public way, I realize there's still so much pain to heal around it. So thank you for that, Lily, for real. I can explain some ways I got through it. I pulled a tarot and did lots of reflecting over my 50 years that brought me to this point. Doing the mirror work, I was able to see a cycle of 5 decades, and this chapter with Olai feels like I am coming full circle. I approached this opportunity being kind of nervous and heavy about it. I tried on symbols of cycles and lightness, defying gravity, and returning home with new insights after a journey seemed to fit. Then I decided to ask the tarot on how to approach the story and structure it, and I pulled the Seed of the Earth card, and it said, delight in the adventure. Revel in your own curiosity, drawing you forward. This is a moment for exploring and enjoying it. The good news is all around you. It only needs your attention. I am finding joy paying attention to telling the story. Grief and struggle is also with me in this telling. One other note is that in this image, I put the blue flag iris from the tarot card deck that I pulled called Lineages of Change, which is a new deck created by Adrienne Marie Brown. And I put it at the center of the wheel, a hub. Irises are my mother's flower, and she is helping me. My mother's transition is a big part of this chapter of my leadership and shaped my pathway. She was actually on a Ferris wheel for real when and approaching her final days with cancer, and she told me, you only live once, if that. I try to live with my mother's credo playing along. Olai's work will ask youth to process grief in the healing we will embark on. Building intentional relationships with communities means we continue to work on our relationships with ourselves. These 3 archetype cards reflect what I learned about myself from looking in the mirror on this wild Ferris wheel shortly after leaving Farragut and leaving system education. I can frame mirror work with questions. I can frame mirror work questions with Yoso's idea about community wealth to reflect on what I come with as we build Olai. So if you look at the warrior card, I think about resistance capital, and I ask, as a woman who grew up caretaking and parenting in a biracial family, especially from my white father's wounded ego, what are the contours of resistance capital that I carry? Just as my little girl learned to be a champion for justice for Black males growing up, how do I resist patriarchy when building with others? At the healer and card, if you look at the healer card, I think about familial capital. I ask, how do I leverage my abuelita Lila's example of cura and care, healing work that she exhibited in our family? How can returning to myself and working on integrating my parts help me belong to myself and heal ancient wounds? Another familial capital question I ask. My immigrant mother raised me on the American dream, which I financially benefit from today, while ideologically I've resisted ever since I was a teen. How do I work from this real life family capital to help liberate more people? The final card, bridge, I think about navigational capital. And I ask myself, with the skin I'm in, I can access both white worlds and BIPOC worlds and communities. Not quite as a belonging insider, but still. As a person with big practice bridging worlds, how do I leverage my navigational capital to best help dismantle racism as much as possible? In my own nuclear family as a mother, what can I share with my Black children about multiraciality that helps them navigate social institutions that confront them? Building aligned relationships with communities requires asking questions in the mirror that we may never answer. If you don't know where you are, you've arrived. So those are some of my mirror inquiries that are fueling the spin of my Ferris wheel right now, especially since we head into our Olai Youth Participatory Action Research Project starting next week with 14 youth from Lawndale as of this morning. Many from Farragut, These young people will come, some from other Lawndale high schools, and even a college student from Malcolm X will join us. And what a brilliant chance this has been to practice applying Yoso's cultural wealth ideas to the lens I hold up, looking at the picture, at the culture we want to build in this Artivism project of Lawndale. Like the white balloons, I will release these questions with the hope that we start to birth this better home place based on the beautiful assets that each child will bring. So navigational. I'm thinking about and asking, how can we learn from this cohort of youth, even navigating to the project's theater-wide location when it presents challenges based on ongoing dividing lines in Lawndale? Familial questions about capital come up. What can the sibling pair in this project cohort share about their larger family experience in navigating life in North Lawndale? Why did they attend high school in Austin at Michelle Clark while living in North Lawndale? Social. As we are linking this cohort across schools and sets and racial identities and other identity markers, how can this diversity be leveraged to strengthen the social bonds within and beyond this project? What life lessons can adults bring to the project that help youth build interest and motivation towards racial solidarity in Lawndale? Linguistic capital. What are the opportunities for the Artivism Project of Lawndale to students to showcase participants' home languages and support everyone's critical understanding of life on both sides of Cermak? Aspirational. What if this project exceeds our wildest dreams, despite all the fears and factors, especially that this new administration wishes for our lives and our work? Resistance. How can we center love and trust within this group of adolescents to heal wounds of racism in Lawndale and fuel our heartfelt quest for equal rights and collective freedom? We build stronger arts partnerships in schools when adults and youth can show up whole and be more than enough. Thank you.
Cecily, thank you so much. Receiving all of the wisdom, all of the power. I just want to ask everyone to please show some love for Cecily right now in the chat, through reactions. As she shared, right, this is the first time she shared her story that way. There was so much in her story around being in a school, being out of a school, and also a lot of hard truths and realities about not only our city, but our students' realities too, regardless of where they are in the city. So thank you again, Cecily, just taking it all in. Um, and also want to give all of us time to just maybe pause. How about we pause? Cecily knows an Ariel. I'm a big pauser. When there's a lot of emotion, just take a moment to pause and receive everything that was shared. And also want to create space for folks to continue to take care of themselves. If you've lost students before, if you've been close to the story, or you just feel it in a certain type of way right now, just again want to continue to advocate for folks taking care of themselves as needed, and also want you to know that you are in community right now with all of us and can ask for anything that you need. There's a lot that's been coming at you around the cultural wealth model, around the objectives, the standards of practice, right? All of the pieces. And we really want to give folks time to kind of empty their cups now, right? So we're going to be transitioning from rooting in community to relating with ourselves, still with the model of Yoso's cultural wealth. Can we have someone come off mute and read the quote that's on the screen out loud and bring it into the group? And can we do this 3 different times with 3 different people, please?
Social change is deeply connected to our own healing, reflection, and well-being.
Social change is deeply connected to our own healing, reflection, and well-being.
Social change is deeply connected to our own healing, reflection, and well-being.
Thank you. We read this quote 3 different times because we probably needed to hear it 3 different times. In arts education with young people and working with young people, it's really easy to give a lot. And also, it's important to hold up that mirror and not only care for ourselves, but as Cecily shared through her story, doing that deep excavating work. And so we are going to move into that with a right pair share. And so the right pair share is going to be in 3 different parts. And so the first part is going to be 5 minutes, where we're just going to take 5 minutes to do a journaling in your own notebook, do some writing in the air. That's what I used to tell my students. Do some reflection and really think about this question: what socialized assumptions might we have about our students' aspirations, resilience, and assets? What might we need to unlearn about our students, their schools, and their communities to deepen our partnerships? That question might feel a little tricky, but I also want to explicitly name that Cecily, Ariel, and I are coming into this space with the assumption that all of us, like all of us in this call, have this work to do, that we all have, of course, learning to do, but we also have unlearning to do, even just as adults. We have adult privileges and ways of being that are over young people, right? So, and that's all of us in this call. So we want to push everyone in this call to sit with that question, even if it kind of triggers like a wait, what? We're going to sit with that question. Then we're going to move into 10 minutes of a breakout group in pairs where you'll introduce yourselves and share more about the reflection you had, and then we'll come back whole group to process some more. So right now, we're just going to do the silent reflection. So I want you to go ahead and sit with that question. Take the 5 minutes. I will let you know when you have 1 minute left. And then after that, I'll take us through the next step. So 5 minutes, silent reflection. What socialized assumptions might we have about our students' aspirations, resilience, and assets? What might we need to unlearn about our students, their schools, and their communities to deepen our partnerships? Welcome back, everyone. Welcome back, welcome back. So, yeah, I posed a really tricky question. I'm sure it's not the first time, right, that we've been asked that, but to process everything to this point and to process it in pairs, maybe trios. Some of you were in trios. So I want to ask folks now as we come back I want to open it up to the group to go off mute, to share in the chat, whichever way is comfortable for you. What's a phrase or a word or a reflection that captures any insight or realization that is sitting with you in this moment about your own unlearning, about your learning, about the story? We are like so ahead of time. So really, we have actually space to process on many different levels if folks want to share in whichever way is coming to them.
Tyra, I see you wrote Savior Complex. Do you want to say something about that?
Um, I could, but I kind of want to give Marissa an opportunity to expand on that as well, since she's the one who introduced the phrase in our chat. Not to put you on the spot, Marissa, but
No, it's okay. I'm happy to. I was actually typing something along the same lines in the chat, so I'll untype it. Yeah, we were just talking about really not coming into these classrooms where a lot of our students come from poverty. A lot of them come from maybe situations where they're under-resourced. And then coming in, I said, as a white woman, but then Tyra pointed out, like, it can also be teachers of color coming from maybe more affluent or privileged neighborhoods. They can still have that experience of, like, you don't want to blow in with this like kind of savior complex, this like vibe of like, I've got all the answers, I've got all the, good stuff, and aren't you lucky to have me here? But really the unlearning is like starting to recognize that the students do have all this cultural wealth, even if it's not, wealth, but they have this cultural wealth that they're bringing to the table, and recognizing that that has a lot of value, and that, every residency or, work in the schools should really be more of a partnership and a collaboration than just a delivering the goods. That's kind of what we were talking about.
Thanks for that, Marissa, and thanks, Tyra. Are there other folks who'd like to come and share? Even if it's in the chat, or if you want to just come off mute, go for it.
My partner and I were talking about musical capital and how kids that we work with have a deep, many of them, most of them, pretty much all of them have a deep relationship with music and with rhythm and with text, even textual analysis, just based on the things that they listen to. And so really wanting to enter into any space, any school, thinking about the deep artistic literacies that the youth already possess.
Thank you so much, Lizzie. I love that. It's like one of my favorite things as a musician, that like there's so much. Yeah. Are there other folks you want to share? I'd love to know, even if you don't want to share something that you were talking about with your partner, just the experience of the silent reflection. If there's anything that anyone wants to say about their experience doing that portion, love to hear that too.
Okay, this is Andrea. And me and Diamond, we were talking about how communities are misread sometimes. They're not always like the media portrays them. And the schools too. They may, you'll find different kinds of schools in different neighborhoods that some are working good and some are not. I stay in Inglewood and I'm perfectly comfortable here. And it has this, rumors. I mean, some of the things are true, but I feel totally comfortable. So all that is, it's not necessarily, you just can't judge a book by its cover. That's what we used to say.
Mm. Thanks, Andrea. Lots of repping of Greater Englewood today. I love it.
I'll share something that I've been trying to practice more, but doesn't come instinctively to me. And I think as a Chicagoan, as someone that grew up here, as someone that loves young people and spaces and groups, I think it's really easy for me to show up in a space and be like, "Hey, um, I think I have learned so much from being like, what is the story here?" Which I heard so much about in Cecily's story of the story, right? Like, what is the story? Like, what's the redlining story? What's the story of power? What's the story of resistance? Like all the stories that, to Andrea's point, are not shared with us in the news and mainstream media, but there's like the elders in the story know, and or the elders in the neighborhood know, right? And like if you really dig around, you can find out more. But I think it's like remembering that I'm coming into a space, no matter how open I may be or come in partnership, that is important for me to learn and that I have to do that work.
Yeah, I think when we come into the classrooms, we gotta, well, it depends on what we're coming in to do, but we still have to assess the students, and see how to approach them and what's going to work. We have to, may have one thing on our mind, we're gonna go in this way. And then when we get there, it may be a whole nother different situation. And we have to be aware to be able to be, what I want to say, flexible, you know, so that we could reach the students, because we don't know, but we got to keep our minds open.
Thank you so much. Any last comments or reflections or things that folks want to share?
I feel like the last two folks that shared their comments, just, yeah, like the question of like what, when we enter into a place, classroom community, school community, that's new, and maybe not going the way we anticipated or thought, like what are the questions we ask ourselves to stay curious about that situation and not shut down, right? And stay open to really understanding that, like, music beneath the words of what's happening in the story, right? Like what do we know about ourselves, right? To anchor in that like curiosity always, and not shut down, and as adults in the space, just to stay open and curious about the lived experiences that we're, stewarding. I think I don't have the answer, but I like the question around what do I need to in any place I go. Yeah, stay curious.
Thank you, Cecily. On the screen here, you'll see a list of some of the resources that we mentioned in our presentation. So, and they do have links in them. So when you receive the slide deck, you'll be able to click on any of these and learn a little bit more about the resources that we talked about today. So I really wanted to say thank you y gracias to all of you all for being here, to Cecily for sharing her beautiful story, to Lily for helping us all put all of this together and doing it as a brand new part of our team here at Ingenuity. And we just want to close with a final reflection. So on your own, reflect on the following sentence to complete the blank space, and there are no wrong responses. One way we might use Yoso's cultural wealth model in our collective work is by blank. And you can feel free to pop your answers in the chat. Again, muchas gracias. You don't have to share in the chat. And if you have more than one idea and you do want to share all of your brilliant ideas, go for it. But it's also something to take with you as you continue on your own learning journey as part of our wonderful arts education sector in Chicago. Marissa says that one way we could use Yoso's cultural wealth model is by having more intentional conversations and professional development with teaching artists around this topic. And Lizzie says using it as a framework for creating content to build on student assets. Gosha says focusing on what the students already know and bring in what they need and not as much on what we have to offer. So being truly student-centered. Ryan says self-reflection and direction. Love it. Cecily says, I'm wondering what youth thinks about these 6 pots of gold. And another way that we might use Yoso's cultural wealth model in our collective work is simply to think. Well, if you have multiple ideas or you would like to get into community with other folks and explore some of the ideas, some of the ways that we can actualize the work that we've done today, please, please, please join us for our community of practice, which is January 30th at the Logan Center. And you'll get more information about that. I'm gonna actually go ahead and see if I can get back to that slide to throw that on the screen. But it's Thursday, January 30th from 2 to 5. There will be food. There will be community with other folks, and we'll have lots of opportunity to get together in order to actualize some of this work and put it into practice. So again, muchas gracias to Cecily and Lily and to all of you all for being here. And we can go out on a little more music.
Thank you, Ariel, and thank you, everyone.